defense, fuel, and food. We'll learn about farm businesses that are making a difference with renewable energy production and energy efficiency savings. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Vermont farmers are often at the forefront of alternative energies. Think cow power or seed oil production. With Vermont's comprehensive energy plan calling for increased energy from renewable resources and a reduction on greenhouse gas emissions, Vermont's food growers are playing their role in advancing the state's goals. Case in point is the Riverberry Farm in Fairfax. Keith Silva has our story.
Inside the greenhouse at Riverberry Farm in Fairfax, it's the little things, like this blossom on a strawberry seedling that proves spring is on its way.
Here at Riverberry Farm, we grow about 40-50 acres of field vegetables. We do greenhouse tomatoes, bedding plant operation, and we do a pick-your-own-strawberry business as well. So we've been farming here for 22 years and plan to be here for hopefully another 10 or 15.
For small fruit and vegetable growers like Marchant, the growing season starts small and flat, or in flats, as the case may be. To get these babies growing and going, Marchant needs to turn up the heat.
We have been burning propane for about 20 years and going through lots and lots of gallons. A few years ago, when the prices got rather high, we were looked at some alternatives and kind of got excited by it.
Marchant's interest in an alternative fuel source led him to look into the cost of installing an outdoor biomass boiler. These boilers cost more to install than the equivalent propane systems. The cost of this project was $13,000. Marchant received a Rural Energy for America program, or REAP grant, through the Vermont Agency of Agriculture for 50% of the project and paid for the rest himself.
There's a high upfront cost with this boiler compared to just a regular hanging propane heater, but it gives us a lot more flexibility on how we can heat, plus the cost of the fuel is cheaper than propane, even with the commercial rates we get and the low rates that we've had the last couple of years. We're still saving money, so if that propane price goes up, we're looking at a pretty short payback period. We're really trying to reduce our propane use, mainly because, one, a cost, and two, in terms of climate change and our carbon footprint, using renewable fuels makes a lot more sense. And it's great because the wood pellet industry is a real local industry now. It's all within just the Northeast. So.
One catch to this project is that most of the commercially available biomass boilers are not set up for small fruit and vegetable production. So Marchant has been working with University of Vermont Extension to help him through his growing pains.
The great thing about this project with Extension is that they've allowed us to kind of experiment with some systems, and realizing that it takes quite a number of years to figure out what's going to work well with the greenhouses. This unit has worked quite well. I think we're learning, and the Extension program allows us to experiment. And without that, funding-wise, it would be really difficult to put the money out ourselves for that.
We installed a number of different ways of getting heat into the greenhouses.
Yep.
In order to work on the nuts and bolts of this project, Marchant has had the help of UVM Extension agricultural engineer, Chris Callahan.
We've got a lot of options added to this system that ultimately an installation wouldn't have. So we're trying to demonstrate not only switching to a different fuel, a renewable, relatively carbon neutral fuel, but also different ways of getting the heat into the crop. You know, either through heating the air, heating the ground near the actual roots of the tomatoes, for example, heating crops that are grown on benches with hot water flowing through them. The other thing that happens when you move away from a hot air furnace to a boiler is you're moving water as opposed to air. And so there's more plumbing and pumps and valves. And so some of that can be difficult to sort out without a little bit of help. So my role to a large extent has been designing that system and helping figure out the pump sizes, the plumbing sizes, and how it all works together.
That way. It hasn't been an issue with two houses because it takes everything that it's got. Having an extension engineer really helped me in terms of trying to design the system. Extension was extremely helpful in this whole project.
Propane remains the primary fuel most commercial vegetable and berry growers use to heat their greenhouses. The biomass boiler at Riverberry Farm reduces Marchand's reliance on propane, but it doesn't eliminate it. The other reduction going on here is hard to see, but it's easy to understand when you go for a drive.
In Dave's installation here, he's avoiding about 460 gallons of propane a year by using a biomass boiler. That's about 5,000 pounds of carbon dioxide that's being avoided on a net basis. And that translates to about 5,000 passenger miles of car travel in this one greenhouse, in this one boiler, and in a very short season.
That's about the distance it would take to drive round trip from Fairfax, Vermont to Fairfax, Virginia. 5 times. That's a lot of miles, a lot of savings, and a lot of footsteps in reducing the carbon footprint we all share. In Fairfax, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
Joining me now is Chris Callahan, the agricultural engineer with UVM Extension. Thanks so much for being in.
Thanks for having me.
Now, why does the system that we just saw result in the net reduction of carbon emissions?
So what Dave's done is switch from using propane, fossil fuel, to using a renewable fuel, in this case wood pellets, that have, as trees grow, they absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and so the carbon that's released when they're burned is from the atmosphere originally.
And so have other farmers adopted the same type of system?
Yeah, so this year we've actually seen an additional 6 installations of this type of system, this type of biomass boiler, largely because of the work Dave was able to do and demonstrating it successfully.
And two, also now that that's in place, it saves other farmers the time actually and probably money to install the system and do it correctly.
We've gotten much quicker at doing it and avoided a lot of the same mistakes.
And so the demonstration project at Riverberry Farm has helped others become familiar with it, and they're thinking, okay, well maybe this will work for us too.
Yeah, it's always helpful to have a demonstrated success you can point to, and particularly a peer farmer who's done it and can speak about it.
But it's not perfect for every farm.
No, so one of the things that we do is always try to have a discussion early on when somebody's considering an alternative way of heating a greenhouse and see what makes the most sense for their operation. Yeah.
Is it different for bigger farms versus smaller farms?
It can be, and for example, some farms, larger greenhouse operations might use a single larger boiler to heat multiple houses, whereas some operations might find it's better to have multiple boilers of a smaller size.
And so what sort of challenges do farmers face with these kinds of systems?
So the one that usually stands out is just the higher initial cost. Dave referred to that in the video. They are more expensive up front. There is a cost savings on a recurring basis that can help pay that premium off. The other is just getting the system squared away, understanding how it's going to be installed. It's a different way of doing the job. It's a propane heater that just hangs in a greenhouse is pretty straightforward. This is a more complex system, so trying to sort out the details can be challenging.
And so you were mentioning earlier to me when we were talking, and you said the fact that there is a carbon emissions reduction is really sort of a selling point too for the farmer.
Yeah, many of the farms that I've worked with, particularly the early adopters, are motivated not only by the potential cost savings on a recurring basis, but also by the carbon emissions reduction. The equivalent to driving to Fairfax, Virginia from Fairfax, Vermont.
I think people don't realize too that farmers are under a lot of pressure because the growing season is so short here, and they're trying to extend it.
Exactly. So extend it both in greenhouses, as is the case here, but also on the other end in storage of crops. That short season also makes the payback period on these types of systems a bit more challenging. The recurring savings is over a shorter period of time. So any additional uses on the farm for that heat help make that a better case.
And we had just had, coming off a really long, cold winter, and that's had an impact on farmers.
Absolutely. Folks are starting the greenhouses up later, and even doing so are still fighting against much lower temperatures than normal. So crops are a little bit behind in the greenhouse sector, but on the other hand, a lot more fuel is being used. So I've had a lot more interest in this type of system.
So tell us a little bit more about the role that you play as an engineer with Extension.
Right, so as agricultural engineer with UVM Extension, I often field questions from a variety of the diversified farmers in Vermont on any number of topics, and You know, so it usually comes down to how can technology help farm operations be more viable.
Can you give me some examples of some of the other projects that maybe you've worked with?
Sure. So in addition to the greenhouse heating and renewable energy project, I've been doing a lot of work on winter crop storage. So the idea of storing potatoes, for example, or carrots, harvested in September all the way through to May or June of the next year, and doing that so that they're high quality products at the end of the day. It's another form of season extension, really, for the farms.
I thought you just had to put them in a basement.
Right. So historically, root cellars or cellaring of root crops has been done. One of the things that happens, though, is there's significant loss when conditions are suboptimal. And so one of the things we've been doing is focusing on really maintaining very, very close control of temperature and humidity so that the farms have much reduced loss at the end of the day, and that translates to profit.
And so some of these farmers have actually done some of these projects as far as are working on these kinds of things? Yeah,
we have 10 sites around the state where we've implemented a remote monitoring system that enables the farmer to actually monitor their crops in storage from their iPhone or from the comfort of their desk. And we've seen significant reduction in waste. As you know, before the project, waste rates of about 20% of stored crop, going down to about 5% with the monitoring.
Wow, that's significant.
Yeah.
And so it allows farmers, obviously, to sell more product.
Yes, sell more product, and also allows them to operate in times of year when cash flow can sometimes be challenging.
Mm-hmm. And so the biomass boiler that we saw in the greenhouse, can they also be used for other applications?
Absolutely, and in fact, it's something that makes the whole system pay off much sooner. For example, if you have another heat load, say a packing house, in addition to the greenhouse, that's needed at a different time of year. That helps the boiler be used for a larger portion of the year and pay it off sooner.
I hadn't thought of that. Obviously, you're just thinking wintertime.
Yeah, but anything that might be able to use heat or hot water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are some of the other applications that you've worked on? I mean, some other food products that have been helped through some of the work that you've done?
Right, so I'm getting more involved in food processing. So, and in Vermont, that tends to be light processing, things like adding value to meats through curing or other types of processing. A lot of the same principles are at work. You know, how do we control conditions so that foods are delivered safely to consumers and with high quality?
Mm-hmm. Do these projects take a lot of time to sort of research and work through?
There's a fair bit. It's a diverse set of projects that I get to work on, and so they're always learning something new. And you know, again, that really to me gets back to Extension's mission to provide knowledge-based research to work.
And do the farmers come up with some ideas themselves, or is it driven
Absolutely.
mostly by the engineering?
No, it's I try to be open to you know, what I consider the farmers I get to work with to be just incredibly pioneering and innovative, and so most of the ideas are coming from them, and my job is to help them pursue those ideas.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that there's that connection that people probably don't think about is energy. You need energy to produce food.
Absolutely, and it's something we've historically somewhat ignored. But as we get closer to our food systems and as fuel and energy costs increase, it becomes increasingly important to understand that. And so it's a majority of my work right now.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of pressure on farmers too to, as you said, extend the season and provide more produce more times of the year.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. People want local food year-round, and that's a large part of what we're working on.
Mm-hmm. And they actually kind of expect it too. We were talking earlier too, and you said by the time spring arrives, not only do people want sort of spring vegetables, but they also want vegetables maybe that they are used to seeing midsummer.
That's right, yeah, and again, that's the important part of having a greenhouse heated, is enabling a jump start on that season.
Mm-hmm. If people are interested in getting more information about on-farm energy alternatives, what should they do?
So the Extension website, which I believe is on the screen now, is a good source for information. I'd also encourage people to explore the Vermont Food Atlas, which is a project of the Vermont Farm to Plate Network.
Mm-hmm. And they can get information there.
Yes.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Okay.
And that's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.